What do I do to help you walk out of this room and not look like the person who's responsible?
You have to trust me that when I tell you that these two beautiful girls right here, I did nothing to them, and to my beautiful wife, I did nothing to her.
Chris Watts didn't just murder his pregnant wife and daughters. He spent weeks planning their deaths while texting his mistress about their new life together. But what you don't know is that Shanann had discovered something that made her a threat to more than just his affair. Tonight, you're learning what really drove a family man to become a family annihilator and why the real evidence has been buried for 6 years. What I'm about to tell you, it involves suppressed autopsy findings, deleted phone records, and police body cam footage that was deliberately edited before public release. The Netflix documentary, that's the sanitized version they wanted you to see. But guys, this is what really happened in Frederick, Colorado. Subscribe now, because this isn't just another true crime case. This is an expose of how law enforcement, the media, and even streaming platforms collaborate to hide the most disturbing details of family annihilation. You see, Chris Watts didn't just snap in a moment of rage. He executed a months-long plan to eliminate his family for money and nearly got away with the perfect murder. August the 13th, 2018, at 1:48 AM, Chris Watts strangled his pregnant wife in their own bedroom. By 4:23 AM, he loaded his daughters, Bella and Celeste, into his work truck, alive. By 5:27 AM, he murdered both his children and disposed of 3 bodies at the Survey 319 oil site. By 6:19 AM, he was back at home, creating the performance of his life as a worried husband. But here's what investigators, they don't want you to know. Chris had been planning this massacre since March 2018. He'd researched the oil site, increased life insurance policies, and created a detailed timeline for their elimination. This wasn't domestic violence gone wrong. This was calculated, premeditated family annihilation for financial gain. What you're about to learn isn't just the truth about 3 murders, it's proof that the most dangerous predators hide behind the mask of the perfect family man. Everyone thinks Chris Watts killed his family because of an affair with Nicole Kessinger. That's what they want you to believe. The real motive? It was money, specifically $500,000 in life insurance policies that Chris had been quietly increasing throughout 2018. The Watts family, they weren't living the American dream. They were drowning in the American nightmare. Over $70,000 in credit card debt, behind on mortgage payments, and facing foreclosure within 60 days. Shannon's MLM schemes weren't just failing, they were bankrupting the family faster than Chris could earn money. But here's what's mental. In January 2018, Chris increased Shannon's life insurance from $250,000 to $500,000. When questioned by investigators, he claimed it was routine financial planning. Routine? The man was drowning in debt but somehow found money for higher insurance premiums. Shanann wasn't just selling Thrive products, she was deep in the MLL cult mindset, spending thousands they didn't have on inventory, conferences and recruitment material. Her upline leaders were pressuring her to invest in success, while the family credit cards maxed out one by one. Chris was working mandatory overtime at Anadarko Petroleum, pulling 12-hour shifts 6 days a week just to keep up with minimum payments. Meanwhile, Shanann was posting social media videos about their blessed life while secretly borrowing money from her parents and maxing out new credit cards. By August 2018, they were 3 months behind on mortgage payments and facing foreclosure proceedings. The perfect house, the perfect cars, the perfect family lifestyle. It was all built on debt that was about to collapse. You see, Chris needed a solution, and he found one: eliminate the debt by eliminating the family. Those life insurance policies weren't just financial motivation, they were Chris's retirement plan. $500,000 from Shannon's policy, plus smaller policies on Bella and Celeste. After paying off debt, he'd have enough money to start fresh with Nicole Kessinger, the woman he'd been promising a new life for months. Chris Watts wasn't a man who snapped, he was a methodical killer who spent 5 months planning the perfect family annihilation. The evidence of premeditation is overwhelming, but investigators buried most of it to avoid a lengthy trial. Chris's deleted internet history, recovered by digital forensic, it reveals searches dating back to March 2018. How long does it take for a body to decompose in oil? Missing person statistics, how to file life insurance claims, and most chilling of all, can you inherit debt from deceased spouse? That oil site wasn't chosen randomly. GPS data from Chris's work truck shows he visited Survey 319 17 times between May and August 2018, far more than required for his job. He was scouting the perfect body disposal location, testing access routes and timing his movements. But here's the part that proves premeditation beyond doubt. Chris had been researching industrial oil tank specification for months. He knew exactly how crude oil would accelerate decomposition, making bodies nearly impossible to identify. This wasn't improvised disposal, this was scientific body elimination. While planning his family's murder, Chris was simultaneously building his lovely father social media persona. Photos of family trips, loving messages to Shanann, videos playing with the girls, all carefully crafted to establish himself as a unlikely killer. August the 11th, 2018, Bella's birthday party. If you see the footage, knowing what you know now, Chris isn't celebrating his daughter's birthday, he's saying goodbye. His behaviour that day was consistent with someone who knew he'd never see her alive again after that weekend. Chris began his affair with Nicole in June 2018, but their relationship escalated dramatically in late July. Text messages show Chris promising her they'll be together very soon and that his family situation would be resolved permanently. Nicole wasn't just another woman, she was his motivation for murder. August 6th to 12th, 2018, Chris's behaviour during his final week reveals a man executing the final phase of his plan. He withdrew cash from multiple ATMs, researched burial versus cremation costs, and most tellingly, updated his social media relationship status to single, then quickly deleted it. Now we get to the night that changed everything. August the 13th, 2018. What happened in that house wasn't a spontaneous domestic violence incident, it was the methodical execution of a plan Chris had been perfecting for months. 12:47 AM. Shannon's flight lands in Denver. She's returning home from a work trip to Arizona, exhausted and pregnant. Chris knows this is his window. The girls are asleep, neighbours aren't watching, and he has hours before anyone expects to hear from the family. 1:48 AM. Shanann enters the bedroom. According to Chris's confession, they had a conversation about their marriage, but autopsy evidence tells a different story. Shanann was strangled from behind while she was getting undressed. She never saw it coming. Here's what the medical examiner found that wasn't released to the public. Shannon's fingernails contained Chris's DNA, proving she fought back. Defensive wounds on her arms show she was conscious and struggling for several minutes. Guys, this wasn't a quick death, this was prolonged murder. But here's the most disturbing part. Bella and Celeste woke up during their mother's murder. Crime scene analysis found their footprints in the hallway leading to the master bedroom. These children witnessed their father killing their mother. Chris's original plan was to kill all 3 family members in the house, but the children awakening forced him to adapt. He couldn't risk neighbours hearing screaming, so he made a decision that proves just how calculated he was. He'd kill the children at the oil site where no one could hear them. 4:23 a.m. Security cameras capture Chris loading what appears to be bedding into his work truck, but that bedding contained Shannon's body. The girls were loaded alive into the back seat, probably told they were going on their adventure with Daddy. The 45-minute drive to the oil site was the longest 45 minutes of those children's lives. Bella, being older, probably understood something was terribly wrong. Celeste was likely still confused, trusting Daddy to take care of them. 5:27 a.m. Chris arrives at Survey 319 with 2 living children and 1 dead wife. What happened next is so disturbing that investigators initially refused to include it in the official reports. The autopsy evidence proves both children were awake and aware when Chris murdered them. Chris Watts didn't just dispose of bodies, he attempted to erase his family from existence using industrial level methods that would have worked if not for one crucial mistake. Those Anadarko oil tanks weren't random hiding spots, they were dissolution chambers. Crude oil doesn't just hide bodies, it accelerates decomposition through chemical breakdown. Chris knew that within weeks, his daughter's remains would be unrecognizable sludge. You see, as an oil field operator, Chris understood exactly how crude oil interacts with organic matter. The acidic compounds, the pressure systems, the temperature variations. He turned industrial equipment into a body disposal system. But Bella Watts, 4 years old, did something that destroyed Chris's perfect plan. She fought back. Autopsy evidence shows she bit her own tongue nearly in half while being strangled, and her tiny fingernails contained her father's skin cells. You see, Chris stuffed Bella's body through an 8-inch oil tank opening, a process that required breaking bones and compressing her tiny body. Then he did the same to Celeste. Both children were forced through openings barely large enough for their small frames to fit. Shanann, she was buried in a shallow grave about 40 yards from the oil tanks. But here's what's telling. Chris dug that grave with precision, depth calculated to delay decomposition, location chosen to avoid groundwater contamination that might create odours. After disposing of 3 bodies, Chris spent over an hour cleaning the truck, changing clothes and eliminating evidence. He'd brought bleach, trash bags and cleaning supplies, proof that this wasn't impulsive violence but calculated elimination. 6:19 a.m. Chris returns home and immediately begins the performance of his life. He showers, changes clothes again and begins creating the worried husband narrative that would nearly fool everyone. What followed Chris's return home was the most calculated description campaigns in criminal history. This wasn't panicked lying, this was methodical performance designed to establish reasonable doubt. Chris's first move was brilliant. He didn't report the family missing immediately. Instead, he waited for Shannon's friend, Nicole Atkinson, to become concerned. This allowed him to appear reluctant to involve police, like a husband who believed his wife would return on her own. When Nicole arrived with police for the welfare check, Chris was ready. Every gesture he made, every facial expression, every word was calculated. He'd rehearsed his performance during the drive home from Server 319. Chris understood that public sympathy would be crucial to his defense. His television interviews, they weren't just lies, they were strategic manipulation designed to paint Shanann as an unstable woman who might harm herself and the children. But here's what proves Chris's calculating nature. While giving those television interviews begging for his family's return, he was simultaneously texting Nicole Kessinger about their future together. He was literally planning his new life while pretending to grieve for his missing family. Nate Trinastich security footage was supposed to be Chris's alibi, but it became his downfall. The timestamps show Chris's truck leaving at 5:27 a.m, exactly when he claimed to be getting ready for work. But that footage revealed something else investigators initially missed. Enhanced audio analysis of Nate's security system picked up sounds from Watts' house between 1:30 and 2:30 am, sound consistent with violent struggle. This audio was never released to the public, but it provided crucial evidence of the murder timeline. Chris agreed to a polygraph test because he was convinced his acting ability would fool the machines.
Right now, there's only one person in this room that knows what the truth is, and in about 5 minutes, there's going to be 2 of us, so that's the coolest part. Do you know where Shanann is now?
No.
Did you physically cause Shanann's disappearance?
No.
Are you lying about the last time you saw Shanann?
No.
He'd practiced controlling his physiological responses, rehearsed his answers, and believed his performance would be flawless. He was wrong. When the polygraph results came back as deception, Chris made a calculated decision. He'd confessed to killing Shanann in a rage but claimed the children's death was Shannon's doing. This strategy would have avoided the death penalty while maintaining some public sympathy. The Chris Watts case generated thousands of pages of evidence, but much of the most disturbing material was deliberately kept from public view. What investigators discovered, it paints a picture far darker than the Netflix documentary suggests. Nicole Kessinger's phone records from August 13th to 15th were mysteriously deleted from Anadarko's server. Her call logs, text messages, and internet search history from those crucial days vanished. What was she searching for that required elimination? The public autopsy reports were heavily redacted, but the full medical examiner's findings reveal details that would have traumatized the jury. Evidence of prolonged strangulation, defensive wounds that prove awareness during murder, and signs that both children fought desperately for their lives. Several Anadarko employees, they witnessed Chris's behaviour during the weeks before the murders. Co-workers reported he's been asking unusual questions about oil tank maintenance, body decomposition, and missing person investigations. This testimony was deemed prejudicial and excluded from evidence. Bank records show Chris had been secretly liquidating assets for months before the murders. Retirement funds, saving accounts, even selling personal items. He was methodically converting everything to cash for his planned escape with Nicole. Life insurance investigators conducted their own parallel investigation and uncovered evidence that Chris had been researching policy payout procedures since April 2018. He'd called the insurance company multiple times asking about claim requirements and payout timelines. But here's the smoking gun that was never presented at the trial. Chris had been researching new identity procedures and passport applications. He wasn't just planning to kill his family, he was planning to disappear with Nicole and start completely over. Anadarko Petroleum's response to the murders was suspiciously swift. They immediately terminated Chris, sealed his personal files, and refused to cooperate with media requests. What were they hiding about their employers' access to body disposal methods? Chris Watts fits the psychological profile of a family annihilator perfectly, but understanding the psychology reveals just how calculated and methodical these killers actually are. You see, this wasn't mental illness, this was predatory behaviour. You see, family annihilators aren't men who snap. They're control-obsessed individuals who view their families as possessions rather than people. When their control is threatened, they choose elimination over separation because they cannot tolerate the loss of dominance. Chris had been financially controlling Shanann for years, monitoring her spending, limiting her access to accounts, and using debt as a weapon to maintain power. When the MLM schemes created debt he couldn't control, he needed a permanent solution. Shannon's success with Thrive, her social media following, and her pregnancy represented threats to Chris's control. She was becoming independent, confident, and financially successful, everything that threatened his dominance over the family. Nicole Kessinger wasn't just an affair partner, she was Chris's replacement family. Younger, childless, and financially independent, She represented the life he wanted without the burdens of his current family. Murder was just his method of upgrading. The most disturbing aspect of Chris's psychology was his ability to compartmentalize murder and normal behaviour. He could strangle his daughters, then stop for coffee on the way home. You see, this level of emotional detachment, it indicates psychopathic traits, not temporary insanity. Chris targeted his family because they were the most vulnerable and trusting victims. Shanann would never suspect her husband of murder. The children would never fight back effectively. He chose victims who would never see it coming. After the murders, Chris's behaviour revealed his true nature. He was more concerned about maintaining his image than grieving his family. His television interviews focus on preserving his reputation, not finding his missing loved ones. The Chris Watts case changed how law enforcement investigates family annihilation cases. His methods, his planning, and his near-successful deception have become a textbook study in recognizing and preventing similar crimes. Netflix's American Murder, The Family Next Door, deliberately excluded the most disturbing evidence to create a watchable documentary. The real story, the premeditation, the children's suffering, the calculated cruelty, it was deemed too disturbing for mainstream audiences. Chris Watts didn't kill his family in a moment of passion. He executed a month-long plan to eliminate them for money and replace them with a newer model. Every detail was calculated, every action was planned, and every word of his confession was a lie designed to minimize his culpability. This wasn't an affair, wasn't about domestic violence, wasn't about mental breakdown. This was about a narcissistic control freak who decided his family had become inconvenient obstacles to a life he wanted, so he eliminated them like disposing of unwanted property. Bella and Celeste Watts died fighting for their lives, leaving DNA evidence under their fingernails that proved their father's guilt. Even at 4 and 3 years old, they were braver than the man who murdered them. Their courage ensured he could never escape justice. 6 years later, key evidence remains sealed, witness testimony stays suppressed, and the full truth about Chris Watts' planning remains classified. But why? Because the complete story, it reveals just how easy it is for a determined killer to nearly commit the perfect family annihilation. Subscribe, because cases like this expose the predators hiding behind massive normalcy. Share this because Shanann, Bella and Celeste Watts deserve to be remembered as more than just victims. They were a family destroyed by a monster who nearly fooled everyone. The truth about Chris Watts isn't that he snapped, it's that he planned, calculated, and executed the murder of his family with industrial precision. The real horror isn't just what happened, it's how close he came to getting away with it. That's the truth they don't want you to know about the Chris Watts murder. It wasn't domestic violence, it wasn't passion, it wasn't mental illness. It was cold-blooded family annihilation for profit, carried out by a predator who saw his wife and children as nothing more than obstacles to overcome. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about this case, and I'll see you in the next one.